Canadian millionaire Richard Dick Oland was found dead on the floor of his office on a warm summer morning in 2011. The 69-year-old was known to be ruthless in his business dealings. He had no doubt made many enemies. But the scene suggested that his murder had been a crime of passion, that the killer was someone Dick had known well, and maybe even loved. Hi there, I'm Kevin, and welcome to Just Thought Lounge. Today's case at first glance appears pretty open and shut, but there are oddities in the evidence early on, red flags that something else is going on under the surface. There have been extensive critiques of the investigation, many theories of the crime, some more outlandish than others. And at the center of it all, a wealthy family whose secrets will not stay hidden. Let's take a look. The Olands are one of New Brunswick's old money families. In 2011, Richard or Dick Oland held an estate worth about 35 million Canadian dollars. He and his brother Derek had run the Moosehead breweries until a very public battle over control in the early 1980s, when their father picked Derek, not Richard, to succeed him. But Dick found his own path to success. He went on to found trucking companies as well as an investment firm. He also headed numerous charities and helped bring the Canada Games to St. John in 1985.
Le président des Jeux du Canada, the president of the Canada Games, Richard Oland.
It was through this work that he earned the Officer of the Order of Canada, the second highest honor for merit in the Canadian system of orders. Dick and his wife Connie had been married for 46 years. They lived in a restored ancestral mansion in Rothsay, a residential community outside of St. John. Their only son, Dennis, lived with his wife Lisa next door, in the large two-door style house where Dick had grown up. The couple also had two daughters, Lisa and Jacqueline, who had married and settled down locally. Richard Oland's investment firm, the Far End Corporation, or FEC, was named after the historic home that he and Connie shared, Far End. The business was based on the second floor of a 3-story red brick building in the financial sector of Uptown St. John. On July 7th, Dick's longtime personal assistant, Maureen Adamson, arrived to the building as usual just before 9 a.m. She ascended the stairs to the second floor to find that the door to the office suite had been left unlocked. Inside, she found the lights still on. The air conditioning unit had been running at full blast, but no one appeared to be inside. When Maureen left the building the night before, sometime around 6 p.m., Dick had been at his desk catching up with his son, Dennis. The next morning, concerned with what she was seeing, Maureen peered through to Dick's workspace. On the floor behind the large desk, Dick Oland lay face down in a pool of blood. There was no doubt from the scene in front of her that the 69-year-old millionaire was dead. Richard Oland had been hit on the head no fewer than 40 times by a blunt, possibly hammer-like weapon. There were no objects left in the office that were considered potential candidates as the murder weapon, nor were there any items missing that would fit the bill. Whatever had been used had been carried into the office and then back out again. Spatters of blood were found up to 2.75 meters away and 360 degrees around where Dick had fallen to the ground. It was a brutal and gruesome crime scene. Curiously, there was no blood trail leading from the office, in the lobby, or towards the front door or rear exit. It was as though the murderer had committed the act and then just vanished from the crime scene. Investigators from the St. John Police Force, the SJPF, quickly deduced that the killing was not likely to have been a robbery. Left behind was an iPad, digital cameras, Dick's wallet, his Rolex watch, keys to his BMW, and an envelope full of cash. What was missing was Dick's iPhone. Multiple calls and texts had gone unanswered. The last text message received to the phone was at 6:44 p.m. the evening before. It was from Diana Sedlacek, a local realtor and the woman who had been Dick's mistress for the past 8 years. After a series of unanswered messages, Diana's last text simply read, "You there?" The only other item that was thought to be missing from the office was a letter from Diana to Dick. Its exact contents are unknown. The last person known to have seen him alive was his only son, 43-year-old Dennis Oland.
Preliminary results of the autopsy, coupled with the evidence at the scene, clearly indicate that Richard Oland was a victim of foul play, homicide.
There were a handful of potential witnesses who gave statements to the SJPF. On the ground floor of the FEC building was a business owned by the landlord and a friend of Dick's, John Ainsworth, called Printing Plus. At 6 p.m. on July 6th, John was in the Printing Plus office with friend and former employee Anthony Shaw. Initially, both John and Anthony told investigators that between 7:30 and 7:45 that night, they both heard a loud crash on the floor above, followed by a series of rapid thumps. It seemed that the men had actually heard the murder take place, though they did not know it at the time. Neither reacted to or investigated the noises. They just continued working. Across the street at around 7:30 p.m., a family attorney who was also working late in her office told police that she overheard an argument between two men emanating from the FEC building. She later requested to remain anonymous. Finally, the office on Canterbury Street sat across from a trendy and popular restaurant, Thandy. A patron of this restaurant, a man named Jerry Lowe, reported seeing an unidentified man in a black t-shirt exiting the front of the FEC building at close to 8 o'clock. Should these witnesses be believed and their times accurate, Dick Oland was almost certainly bludgeoned to death between 7:30 and 8 p.m. the night before he was found. Around 6 p.m. on the day that Dick was found, his son Dennis sat down with St. John constables for questioning.
Been a long day, huh? Oh, yeah. All right. I know we met before, but I'm Constable Davidson, okay? And,
No one in the Oland family had been told how Dick had passed away, but they knew it couldn't have been from natural causes. Dennis told the constable that there were far too many police cars at the scene for this to have been a heart attack, for example. But in exchange for this speculation, he was offered no details as to what had happened to his father. Dennis, in his mid-40s, was on a second marriage with a blended family of 4 children. He worked as an investment advisor and lived on a large Oland family property in Rothsay, about a 15-minute drive from the heart of St. John. At this stage, the investigative team were already aware of a few key facts that placed Dennis Oland in a suspicious light. He was the last person known to have been in the FEC office. They had also learned that Dick was a difficult and demanding father. And lastly, Dennis had significant, ongoing financial troubles. His father had recently bankrolled his expensive divorce, providing an interest-free loan of roughly $500,000. This had allowed him to stay in his family home with his new wife, Lisa.
I was very likely going to lose my home. Mm-hmm. And this is a home that, it's an old family home. It was owned by my grandparents, been in the family for 70 years. Very important. And there's a farm behind it. And he stepped up and said, look, that's not going to happen. Mm-hmm. And basically, I don't believe my sisters, I know my mother knows a little bit, but I don't think she knows, I don't think they know this, that he basically bankrolled my whole divorce case, mm-hmm. which ended up being $85,000. It was mm-hmm. a very lengthy divorce. Yes. And then, because I had to basically give half of my assets to my ex-wife, mm-hmm. he bankrolled that as well, okay. so that I could keep my house. Right. So basically, I have a mortgage with him, mm-hmm. which is an interest-only mortgage. Mm-hmm. So, at the end of the day, we were talking about, a loan of $500,000 or $600,000. Mm-hmm. It was a lot of money. And I was grateful for it.
Right, of course.
Yeah.
As anybody would be.
As anybody would. It's a lot of money.
The SJPF found that Dennis had developed a habit of living above his means. Between January and July 2011, he spent $86,000 more than his income. He had exceeded the $163,000 limit on his line of credit and was $5,000 over his $27,000 credit card limit. Dennis had missed 2 repayments of just over $1,500 owed to Dick, in addition to 1 mortgage payment of just under $500. With an annual income as a stockbroker of $34,000 and his father as his largest client, Dennis was reliant upon the millionaire to stay afloat. The St. John police suspected that Dennis had gone to his father's office the night before to ask for money. They also believed that he had been refused. During the first half of Dennis's interview, he was relaxed, calm, and talkative, even laughing. He spoke about his relationship with his father. That dynamic was admittedly awkward. Richard Oland, for all of his success, wealth, and Canadian fame, was a difficult man. Socially, he could be abrupt and off-putting. In business, he was known to be ruthless. In his home life, Dick was a domineering father and adulterous husband. But despite all of this, the man was well respected. His family made allowances for his eccentricities. It was just how he had always been. Dennis spoke of his father in both a positive and negative light.
Was he the easiest guy in the world to get along with? No. But not to the point where, someone would, who knew him would want to do something to him. It's not like that. I mean, knowing him as long as we all have, you know a person's character, and you know when to keep your distance, and, that kind of thing. And look, with him, it was a lot easier to keep your distance because it just kept the peace.
Right.
And he had this thing that you can't be friends with your son.
Right.
And I get that. He wasn't friends with his father. I don't think I wanted to be friends with him. But
Dennis told the constable that he could not think of anyone that would want to harm his father. But then he began to speculate. Maybe the assailant was someone on drugs who wanted money. Could it have been an ex-girlfriend? Maybe even his mistress, Diana.
Because of a grudge or revenge?
For any reason, do you see who would benefit the most from your father's death?
Someone who wanted $20 out of a vault to buy drugs. This is reaching a vindictive ex-girlfriend. But I don't know that woman, so I don't know. But no, I think he's pissed a lot of people off, but not to that point where someone would want to kill somebody. The only person that comes to mind is this supposed girlfriend, because she really seems to be a whack job. Like, they call her the Dragon Lady. She's this hostile, somebody who you'd think could be that Fatal Attraction type person.
Yes.
But that's just, I don't know the woman, so that's just me saying stuff that I hear. And I think it's true, but...
The conversation took a turn when Dennis was asked to recount his exact movements from the day before. After leaving his office at around 5 p.m. and driving to Canterbury Street to see his father, Dennis's story is a bit convoluted. His intention was to bring a collection of genealogical documents to discuss with his father. Family history was one of the few areas where the father and son shared a common interest. Dennis arrived at the building with a red plastic bag full of documents. But once he reached the stairs to the second floor, he remembered the ancestral journal that he had left back at his office. Dennis got back into his car to retrieve the journal, even though his office was within walking distance of Canterbury Street. Then he thought better of it and returned to the FEC building with the original collection of documents in the red bag. This was at approximately 5:30 p.m. Personal assistant Maureen recalled that Dick gave his son a friendly reception. She overheard them discussing ancestral records as she packed up for the day and left at around 6 p.m. Dennis was captured by a security camera down the street on his way out of the office at 6:12 p.m. After this, Dennis's memory began to fail, and he left out parts of the story to police.
Well, it's interesting because I was there twice. I first parked in the parking lot where he parks.
Okay.
So when I walked out, I walked that way, and then, my car's over here. Mm-hmm. So I walked over there and got in my car and left.
And where was it? Yours?
Right in front of, right across the street from the office.
In front of the restaurant?
Yeah. Like whether it's in front of or...
At this stage, the constables found his behavior suspicious. His movements suggested that he was distracted, flustered, and not thinking clearly. The way one would behave if they were either extremely agitated or planning a violent act. Dennis initially omitted telling the constable that he had turned the wrong way onto a one-way street after leaving the office at 6:12. Not only that, but he recounted how he texted his wife at that point to let her know that he was on his way, but accidentally sent that text to his sister instead. To the SJPF, this was just more flustered behavior, more unexplained actions.
Now, why wouldn't you have mentioned that to me the first time? I mean, that's a significant thing.
Well, you asked me
I asked
to
you
really think about this.
Yeah.
And I'm really trying to think about it. And so it wasn't significant, I guess, to me. I didn't realize that...
That you went the wrong way the first time?
No.
Up the wrong way?
No, I didn't realize that my route planning was so significant.
The most significant omission made by Dennis Oland during his questioning was about how many times he had entered the FEC building. Much later, the police would learn that Dennis's exit at 6:12 p.m. was not his last. After that, he had returned to the building once more. He claimed he did so to retrieve a logbook that Maureen asked him to deliver to his mother. There was no one left to corroborate his reason for returning to the office for a third and final time. If Dennis Oland had gone to the FEC office to ask for money and was refused, he could have reacted in a rage. The theory being developed held that his first visit to the office was characterized by hesitation. Surveillance video showed his car driving past the office building on 3 occasions before he first parked his silver Volkswagen. The St. John police could not account for these loops. They determined that there had been plenty of options to park nearby. On the second visit, when he finally met with Dick, he must have confronted him. An argument would have ensued when the millionaire refused to give his son more money. Dennis, angry over the refusal, left the office. In a rage, he walked the wrong way to his car. When he found the vehicle, he texted his sister instead of his wife, and then proceeded to drive the wrong way down a one-way street. Then he parked again. Dennis returned to the office and murdered his father.
Everything you've told me, Dennis, is about money. And if I grew up in your circumstances, with money all around you, at this stage of my life, I would expect to be sharing in some of that. Not battling with that son of a bitch every single day and having him control every aspect of my life because he wouldn't give up any of his goddamn money. You didn't plan this, Dennis. He brought this on. Pushed you, squeezed you, rubbed your face in the fact that he controls it all.
The theory had inconsistencies with existing evidence, namely the time of death. The loud banging noises from the second floor were overheard at Printing Plus at 7:30 to 7:45 p.m. Dennis's phone records showed a call with his wife between 7:24 and 7:28 p.m., during which time they were both at home in Rothsay. She had been resting in the sunroom when he arrived. They spoke on the phone to locate each other in the house. Then the two ran some errands. By 7:38 p.m., Dennis was shopping at the drugstore with Lisa. Only minutes later, the store security camera captured him purchasing a few food items for dinner. The cameras even captured him having a casual chat with his aunt, Dick's only sister, who he ran into at the store. All of this took place while Anthony and John listened to noises consistent with the murder, occurring on the floor above, miles away. Investigators found no inconsistency with the timeline. In fact, they determined that it was more likely that Dick had been killed an hour earlier than previously thought. Analysis of Dick's computer revealed no activity after 5:39 p.m., around the time that Dennis arrived. The lack of interaction on his computer or responses to Diana's many messages suggested that Dick was incapacitated, likely already killed, between 5:45 and 6:40 p.m., when Dennis had exclusive opportunity to attack him. The last text message received on Dick's missing iPhone was from Diana at 6:44 p.m. The call that she placed only 2 minutes later went to voicemail. The killer could have destroyed or turned off the phone at that time. Although his cell phone was never located, the last text message pinged off of the Fairvale Tower in Rothsay. That tower was near to the wharf where Dennis had made a brief stop before returning home. It seemed to place the missing cell phone with Dennis shortly after the murder. It was fair to say that the case against Dennis was largely circumstantial, but he remained the prime suspect. The Oland family, however, stood by Dennis and believed that the truth may be found by exploring other areas of Dick's life, such as his business dealings. One proposed theory, which would account for the lack of blood trail out of the office, posited that a professional killer, or rather 2 hired professionals, did the job. In this version, proposed by a Canadian crime writer, Dick's death was both revenge for a business deal gone wrong and a warning to others. The killers would have brought a hammer into the building as their weapon of choice. After the attack, the killer stepped out of the office onto a garbage bag or plastic sheet, which had been laid out on the floor, and then undressed on it, ridding themselves of the bloody items. Then, wearing new shoes and clothing, they carried the evidence out, leaving from the rear exit. There was perhaps a third man acting as a lookout in front of the building, who was spotted by Jerry Lowe while dining at the Fandy restaurant. Proponents of the hired hitman theory point to a failed multi-million-dollar venture called the Can Sugar Refinery. Dick had taken a central role in the initiative, connecting investors, promoting it, and coordinating other aspects. The Can Sugar Refinery had what was described as a catastrophic launch. It soon became clear that the imported raw sugarcane was too coarse to refine for human consumption. The company went under in less than a year, and its largest investors, a Russian and Ukrainian man with rumored ties to organized crime, rapidly lost over $17 million. Other investors, which included a local businessman, the province of New Brunswick, and others, also lost their stakes outright. Dick Oland, however, was said to have come out of the initiative whole. In the months after his death, Rogers Communications, a Canadian-based cellular provider, informed investigators that they had a roaming error on Dick's phone on July 9th. The error indicated that the phone was functioning, but out of range of Rogers' signals. That the phone had in fact been carried out of the country in the days after the murder was a logical conclusion to reach. If the idea of organized crime seemed too far-fetched, the Oland family also developed leads through a private investigator. The PI looked into Dick's personal affairs. It appears that Mistress Diana was never considered a suspect. Her husband Yuri, 30 years her senior, was interviewed by investigators. The 87-year-old had only become aware of his wife's affair after Dick's murder. He was ruled out of consideration. The Oland's PI did uncover another of Dick's girlfriends, a wealth advisor who spent time on and off with Dick at the Chapman Hills Suites. They also went out on sailing excursions on his yacht. When questioned, she denied the affair outright. The SJPF did no further digging on this lead. though there were indications, according to the Olands, that Diana was overtly jealous of her. And that's not all. Rumors swirled in St. John that Dick had also carried out an affair with his son's ex-wife, Leslie. Could Dennis have killed his father in revenge for this affair? According to Dennis, this was nothing more than a hurtful rumor, one that nonetheless gained traction across the city. He said the rumor had been created by none other than the jealous dragon lady, Diana Sedlacek. On July 14th, Dennis and Lisa Oland's home was searched extensively by the SJPF. Given the bloody nature of the crime scene, they anticipated locating a number of stained items, or perhaps even the weapon and missing cell phone. They seized over 50 items: shoes, pants, shirts, blue shorts, a garbage pail in the bathroom, and his cell phone. Searches dug up parts of the family's yard in an effort to find buried evidence. At the Renforth Wharf, where Dennis had stopped on his way home, teams searched and canvassed the area. 2 witnesses saw Dennis at the wharf that evening, but neither saw him throw anything into the water or dispose of any items. His wife's boat, the Loki, was also searched. Dennis's car, a silver Volkswagen, was examined for 16 hours over 3 days, using alternative light sources, chemical agents, and DNA swabs. The forensic teams found nothing in the vehicle. Although he texted his sister just after he was suspected of bludgeoning his father, there was no blood on his BlackBerry's keyboard. Only one piece of incriminating evidence was located: a brown sports jacket with visible bloodstains. Security footage from a Tim Hortons coffee shop on July 6th captured Dennis wearing the same jacket. Maureen had noted him still wearing it when he arrived at the office. She remembered because it was an odd choice in the sweltering heat. Dennis had provided incorrect information to police when asked what he was wearing on the day his father was killed. He very clearly stated that he wore a navy blazer, not the brown sports jacket.
I just want to make sure who's coming in, who's going out. When we look at the surveillance, I can say, that's Dennis. That's this guy.
These pants, the shoes, a dress shirt, and a navy blazer.
You were wearing those pants, those shoes?
Those shoes, a dress shirt, not this, a collared dress shirt.
Yeah.
And a navy blazer.
And a navy blazer.
Yeah.
Okay.
When the brown jacket was tested, it returned positive matches in 3 locations for blood. The stains were extremely small, but the DNA was a match to Dick Oland.
Members from the St. John Police Force arrested Dennis Oland, the son of Richard Oland, and charged him with second-degree murder.
When Dennis Oland went to trial in September 2015, there was controversy brewing over the handling of the case by St. John Police. Their treatment of the crime scene brought into question the integrity of the physical evidence. In the hours after the horrific discovery, the scene had become a kind of spectacle. Multiple unauthorized persons entered the office. As many as 16 officers entered the crime scene on day 1, without any shoe covers or gloves. The area was also improperly cordoned off. Areas of interest, including the foyer, the washroom, the stairs, and exits, were not isolated and processed. Police used the office bathroom for 2 days before they tested it for blood and DNA. They were also using the rear door to the building, but never tested for fingerprints, even though it could have been the escape route of the killer. A footwear impression on the bloodied floor was discovered on day 2, but due to the failure in protocols, it was just assumed that the impression was left later by an officer and not part of the scene. But when they were noticed in early photographs of the scene, investigators recognized their potential significance. The pattern was compared to the shoes Dennis wore that day and every other pair he owned. None were a match. Dennis Oland's defense also poked holes in the Crown's theory of motive. It was 3-pronged. Dennis had a bad relationship with his father, that he disapproved of the affair with Diana, and that he was angry over being denied more funds from his wealthy father. The Crown told the jury about the unlikable Richard Oland. They were told about a man with a multi-million-dollar sailboat on order in Spain, but that kept his wife of over 45 years on a strict $2,000 per month budget and required that she keep expense receipts. They outlined the dire financial hole that Dennis had dug himself into. They argued that he was at risk of losing the family home. Except there was no evidence that Dennis had or would make any financial gains from his father's death. Dick's will was clear and straightforward. Everything went to Connie first. Only after her death would Dennis or his sisters receive anything. He had missed only one mortgage payment on the ancestral home. It was not at risk. Additionally, Maureen testified that Dick had left coordinating payments for Dennis's $500,000 loan from his father to her. He and Dennis never spoke about it directly. Maureen told the jury that Dick inquired about it once in a blue moon and was not at all concerned about any missed payments. The loan was money that would eventually be his inheritance anyway. If Dennis never paid it back, the balance would simply be deducted from his share later. There was never any indication that Dick, as strict as he was with his money, had ever denied financial help to his children. But the Crown had two solid pillars to its case: the jacket and the time of death. The brown jacket that Dennis had lied about wearing was stained with his father's blood, and Lisa Oland, Dennis's wife, had taken it to be dry cleaned the day after he had lied about wearing it to the police. Defense argued that the stains were inconsistent with spatter from an attack. They were very small, and more would have been retained on the jacket even after the dry cleaning if it had been worn in the room where the murder took place. The defense argued that Dennis had simply misremembered which jacket he had worn that day. He had even left the dry cleaner's tag on the collar of the jacket when he hung it back in the closet, ready for the police to find. The dry cleaners testified that they always checked for tough stains to spot treat before they wash any item, and they would have remembered if it was covered in blood. Nonetheless, the jacket seemed to connect Dennis to the scene. Then there was the time of death. The potential discrepancy with witness statements was overcome when Anthony Shaw and John Ainsworth from Printing Plus said they could no longer be certain of the time of the noises on the second floor. Anthony had originally stated, "I knew it was a while after I got there and quite a while before I left, so I would guesstimate to be around 7:30 p.m. When he testified at trial, Anthony contradicted that earlier statement and told the jury it could have been much earlier. The noises occurred sometime between 6 p.m. and 8 p.m. John was distracted by his computer issues that night. He was no longer confident that the noises happened around 7:30 p.m. either. The Crown believed that Dick's inactivity on all electronic devices ending much earlier in the evening, at just before 6 p.m. and never resuming, even after Dennis had left the office, was a clear indication that he had been killed while Dennis was in the room with him. To the shock of the Oland family and many who had been following the trial, Dennis Oland was convicted of murdering his father. The trial was the longest in the province's history, spanning 37 days over 3 months and calling over 40 witnesses. 1 month after the verdict, his defense team filed an appeal. They claimed, amongst other things, that the judge at trial had given the wrong instructions to the jury regarding Dennis's misstatements to the police about his brown jacket. The judge failed in instructing the jurors that they could interpret the statement as a mistake.
These pants, the shoes, a dress shirt, and a navy blazer.
Without this instruction, the jury was left with only the Crown's interpretation, that Dennis had simply lied.
The jurors might well have found the appellant lied about the jacket he was wearing, and in the closing moments of their deliberations, distilled from that bare finding the clinching element for their verdict. We are therefore compelled to quash the conviction and order a new trial.
The Crown did not offer any new evidence when the case was retried a year later. The defense team, however, countered the incriminating evidence more thoroughly. A technical error made by law enforcement in using inappropriate databases to check the background of potential jurors nearly caused a mistrial. The case proceeded, but as a bench trial in front of Justice Terrence Morrison. He would render the final verdict. And the justice found reasonable doubt in more than one place. He found Anthony Shaw's testimony disingenuous. He believed that Anthony's animus towards Dennis impacted his testimony. The earlier statement that he had given to police, that the banging on floor 2 occurred at 7:30 or 7:45, was more truthful. He gave this statement before he was aware that Dennis was the prime suspect. The justice wrote that if Dick was murdered any time after 7 p.m., Dennis could not be the killer. In response to the DNA on the brown jacket, the defense explained that in the months before the murder, Dennis and Lisa had stayed for a time in Dick and Connie's home while renovations were done on theirs. During that time, while Dick and Connie traveled, they stayed in the master suite. Dennis had hung his clothing alongside his father's in the bedroom closet. The justice determined from expert testimony that the stains were likely from a transfer, not spatter from an attack. The justice also wrestled with evidence that suggested that Dick had alcohol in his system at the time of his death. He had been in the office the entire day, ate lunch at his desk, and there was no alcohol in the building. At some point during the day, or perhaps after Dennis left, had Dick popped out for a drink. The testing suggested that he had not had a drink for several hours before he died, but never established a firm time frame. The justice called this evidence a mystery. But perhaps most significantly, there remained unanswered questions around the lack of physical evidence. Where was the murder weapon? What had become of Dick's cell phone? How was there no blood found on any of Dennis's other items of clothing, in his car, or on his phone? There were missing puzzle pieces, and the investigation had not accounted for them. On July 19, 2019, 8 years after Dick's murder, Justice Morrison found Dennis Oland not guilty. He had spent a total of 10 months in prison awaiting the appeal of his conviction years earlier. But after this decision, he was truly a free man. In 2023, yet another book was published detailing the murder and proposing new theories, including speculation that Dick Oland had become too involved with organized crime, or perhaps had fallen victim to a cuckolded husband of one of his many girlfriends. No further arrests have been made in the case. And that was the tragic and mysterious case of the Canadian millionaire Richard Oland. Thank you all once again for watching and supporting us here at JTL. And a special shout out to our newest member, Shawnetta Gad. Your extra support is really appreciated. I'm Kevin, this is Just Thought Lounge, and I'll see you in the next one.
I need that feeling that you brought. Who learned the lesson that you taught? To make a killing's what they saw. Found out the lounge just what you thought. Found out the lounge just what you thought. Cases that really make you think. Found out the lounge just what you thought.